Hello. Today we're going to talk about a day in the life of a developer. I'm Bob Fornell. I've got Shamir here, who can introduce herself quickly.
Yes, hello.
So let's step through this. I've been a developer. I've been writing code for about 40 years, plus or minus. I've been a front end developer for the last 12, senior front end developer for the last 6. Uh, January or so, 2022. I ran into 100 devs and started chatting with folks from 100 devs. And somewhere along the way, I recorded a video on what was that? Repositories, right? From an interviewer's perspective,
Yes.
that people really liked. And Lewis and Shamir asked me to put together some more of those kind of things. So that's why we're here today talking about day in the life of a developer. So let Shamir introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shamir. I am a software engineer at 100 Dev. Um, as Bob mentioned, we actually met early in the journey, and he was very encouraging to myself and many other students at the boot camp. I am also a content creator of my brand called Zona, which I create content. I stream on YouTube. I also am a community manager of a Discord server called Zona Tribe, uh, which I started in September. And now in November, we are well over 100 members, which is amazing. And I have high interest in developer advocacy right now.
Very cool. Okay. So, moving on, getting into this. So, slicing. Um, yes, we're talking about a day in the life of a developer, but the reality is what we do as developers are sliced into other chunks. Okay. Um, a day is where you're doing work. Typically, the work we do is grouped into a larger sprint, which usually is about 2 weeks. Businesses also operate in fiscal cycles, which are usually something like June, July, or July, August, as the end of the year, start of the year, as well as their seasonal impacts as well. So if you think about Black Friday and how it impacts businesses, there's a lot of prep work, to make sure that a website doesn't go down. If you look at a business like Abercrombie and Fitch, they, on Black Friday, they might get 1,000 times the traffic they do through the rest of the year. Okay, they might get 100 times the traffic they do the complete year outside of that Black Friday. Okay, so making sure that their systems can scale up, making sure their code hasn't been changed in a period before that. Those are important things for those businesses. From a developer standpoint, those are really cool points in time with things like the Black Friday, because what you end up with there is a time to jump in and work on some tech debt and things like that that you don't normally get to work on through the year because you got to get things into production and moving. So we're going to talk about these different uh, slices, I guess is the word I used there, as we move forward. Before we get to that, I want to talk about team makeup a little bit. And I'm going to start right at the top center there on that slide, which is we have a product manager or scrum master. This is kind of the person that coordinates this agile activity. And if you get a really good one, it's also that person that kind of buffers you from the business a little bit. Um, you'll learn. You'll have good ones, you'll have bad ones. You learn very quickly who the good ones are, and you see that in how the team works. You typically also have a tech lead. So a tech lead would be somebody that has a lot of experience with the business writing code. They generally will work across multiple teams. And if you have multiple teams that are working in the same code base, generally that's the person that kind of makes sure that you're not stepping on each other's toes, that things line up, and that, hey, if I'm modifying code over here and it's going to impact another team, they make sure that those things don't get missed. You probably will have somebody from QA, quality assurance, quality engineering on the team. You may or may not have somebody from DevOps on the team. I've seen it both ways. DevOps can often be their own team as well. And then any number of developers. Okay, typically you're going to see like 3 to 5, maybe as many as 8, but 3 to 5 is usually that window. Additionally, you'll have a business owner that interacts with a team, business analyst that interacts with the team, and those folks can at times be over multiple teams. Okay, you'll have a UI UX person at times. A lot of times saving money. The UI UX could be merged in with the business analyst. Um, and then product owner. So product owner is the person that represents the user of the software. Okay. And usually they're the final say before code merges in. All right. And I know when we talked through this previously, you had a question on, I don't remember which question you had it on, but Shamir had a question on something in here, and what it brought up was I talked about the business analyst and the UI UX and how they sometimes merge. Okay, and one of the things
Right.
that you should point out, that I should point out here, is you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 on the team side, developer side. You've got 4 on the business side. If your average salary, I mean, we're talking a really low end average salary here, is a hundred
Right.
thousand. If you add 2 developers on, you're talking about $1 million just to run one team. Okay,
Okay.
so there are shortcuts that some companies will take. If you've got the right business analyst, they can do a lot of UI UX. Um,
Okay.
business owners typically it would be best if a company has enough to do one business owner over a team, but one business owner per team. But often I'll see business owners that are over 7, 8 teams. Okay,
Okay.
they tend to get stretched a little thin. And now product owners usually that's a 1-on-1. Okay, um, so this is
I
a
have a
tip. Is
question
Yes, please.
on the product owners. Is that a very technical role? I've never heard of product owner. Okay.
No, that's not a technical role at all. Usually it's
Okay.
somebody from the business that's actually doing that job. Okay,
Okay.
so current client I'm working with, the product owner we have, we're developing a dashboard. This dashboard allows us to track events, and then under those events, there are a series of tasks. So, right, I think currently we have 12 different types of events, uh, and each of those has their own task flow through. And this is for validated clients that can purchase from the company. This product owner has actually done those roles manually before.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving them to something a little more automated for tracking these events and the tasks associated. So this product owner is an expert at the business in doing that role.
Okay.
Okay,
So
uh, so I talked earlier about the sprint. That's the 2 week window. I'm going to move this just a little bit. I just noticed on the software that we're chopping off just a hair of the left edge of the content there. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Sorry for changing the size of the slide mid talk, but I figured you'd want to see all the words on the slides. So a sprint is a 2 week window. Okay. And this is a time frame when we want to complete work. Okay. In the definition here, a value increment of completed work ready for release. Okay. The word value is an important one in there because that product owner, remember I talked about the product owner, you asked the question about the product owner. They're
right.
the ones accountable for what value means.
Okay.
Okay, they're the ones that will give us the weighting on I have to have this done right now, or hey, yeah, you told me about this bug and you tell me it's super important, but to me, I could care less. That's a scenario we're never going to see, so we're going to put that really low in the backlog. Okay.
Okay.
We do have to plan a sprint and that kind of thing, and we're going to get into that. But the team works with the product owner to determine what's valuable, what's not. And we talk about projected capacity for a sprint. And this is kind of a tricky number because we have to go back just a little bit into how we define work. Okay, so work within a sprint, an individual unit of work is done on a card. Okay, There's software called Jira and others that track these cards. Each card has a point value. That point value is a velocity. Okay. A lot of folks will use the points put onto a card to say, hey, if it's 1 point, that's 1 day. If it's 8 points, we estimate that's going to take 8 days to complete. But that's not the way it's supposed to work. Okay, it's velocity. So velocity should be a weight of difficulty over time. So how complicated is it? Okay, so it could be super complicated but not take a lot of time, or it could be really easy and take a lot of time. And those could get the same velocity in points put to them on the card. Okay, and as a team completes sprints, that Jira software, the software that tracks the cards, will calculate a team's velocity over time.
Okay.
Collective velocity. Okay, and so that then becomes their capacity. Now, I say it's a little tricky because, in theory, the way this is supposed to work, and we know theory gets thrown out of the window a lot of times, but in theory, the way this is supposed to work is that velocity is for a specific group of team members. So if somebody leaves the team, or a couple people leave the team, or a couple people get added to the team, that velocity should be thrown out the window. And you should start over again. It doesn't work that way because usually they'll do things like, oh, well, Bob left the team and Bob did 12 points on average every sprint, so we're just going to reduce our capacity by 12 until we put the new person on and figure out where they're at.
Okay.
It's a rough way to do it, but quite often it happens. Okay. So you have this sprint, this 2-week window where work gets done. You're projecting what capacity you can get done. Do we always meet it? Do we get all cards finished? Very rarely, actually. Okay.
Okay.
So any questions here?
So who determined? So you said it's the product owner as far as the velocity. Who manages that?
Usually your velocity is tracked by the software, like I said, but that's usually that. Oh, sorry, that's my plant light just turned on. The velocity, those reports are looked at by the business, but they're also looked at by that Scrum Master. Okay. Their role is management of things. Okay.
Right.
So they're the ones that'll look at that and they'll let you know what that is. And what you do actually is as you come into the sprint, we're going to get a little bit ahead. We may see this on another slide, but as you come into the sprint for sprint planning, you'll take your average capacity. You'll take a look at who's out for the sprint. Who's got time off. And you could actually calculate a reduction in the capacity based on people being on vacation, or like right now, this sprint is going to go over Thanksgiving, and we know we can reduce by at least 50%, probably a little more than that. Okay. But usually that's that Scrum Master that takes care of that stuff.
Okay. Cool.
All right. So sprint planning. So we talked a little bit about the sprint planning and capacity. So that's a third bullet in there.
Right.
But sprint planning is usually on the first day of the sprint. This is where we're preparing for the sprint. I mean, it should be the whole team, including the product owner. We meet on the first day. We conduct the session. By the end of the sprint planning, we should be confident that we can get the work done. I mean, that is one of the questions that gets asked at the end. What's the confidence level that we can complete all this work? We're not saying we have to answer 1 to 10 or in percentages or t-shirt sizes or whatever. We just throw the question out. And folks answer. And, if you're not confident you get it done, you adjust. Okay. The team should be able to implement the plan immediately. Having a clear understanding of how much work remains at any given point through the sprint. One of the charts that we look at or can look at is called a sprint burn down. Okay, and that burn down chart, think about, hey, here's my total capacity, and as I go through the sprint, this should come down, and it should be a nice diagonal graph. I probably did that completely backwards for my camera's backwards, so what I'm seeing on the screen. It never comes out that way. You get bugs that come in that have to be taken care of there quickly, and somebody who didn't have enough work, whatever he did, didn't take real long, so now he needs another card. So, you get this nice line that goes along and it drops down a little bit and goes over and it comes up again and it comes back over and down. And business likes the nice, perfect burn down chart, but we rarely ever get there. That's one of
Yeah.
those constant battles between business and the teams and that's where having a really good scrum master helps out because he buffers that. Um,
Mm.
they like to have that really nice burn down, and we can't bring cards in, but yeah, but now you got 2 or 3 developers just sitting around staring at the screen. That's not good. I'd
Right.
rather have them working and productive. Okay.
Okay.
So, some of the little details in here. That product owner that we talked about earlier. That's the person that orders the work. We want to talk about ordering
Okay.
the work. What's important versus what's not important. Okay.
Mm.
In terms of the people that are going to use your product. What you think is important, what they think is important, are often two different things. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, this is probably the most important meeting. And you do spend a lot of time talking about individual cards and what you know of these cards. Because everybody gets to see the cards multiple times through, so you should be fairly familiar as a team member of what work is out there. Okay.
Okay.
So moving on. So one of the things we talked about in that planning was you're working from a backlog. Okay. So
Right.
the sprint backlog, I mean, this can be just enough cards to go into the next sprint. It could be thousands of cards. Depends on how long that backlog's been in place. Okay, backlog refinement, it's not a formal event, it's an ongoing activity. Um, this is where we add detail to the cards. This is where we order the cards. This is where we estimate how long it's going to take. We add things like what we call user stories. Okay,
Okay.
we describe what we need to do in terms of, as a user, I want to be able to do this. Okay. Typically, we'll have what's called in business terms, it's called a three amigos meeting. Three amigos because we have a front end, a back end, and a QA. They're at the meeting. There are often other people there. Your BA might be there. Your UI UX might be there. But the key that have to be there are your front end, back end, and QA. Okay.
Okay.
And you're going through the cards. You're looking at things like, do we have enough technical information in? Do we have a good definition of done on the card? We talk about each task. We talk about its scope, its acceptance criteria, and all of that within those meetings. Okay. Estimation is done with the backlog at a team level, not necessarily at the Three Amigos meeting. And use something like planning poker. Okay.
Okay.
We say planning poker because it's an easy way to visualize what you're talking about here. Because I talked about weighting the cards, right? We put a
Right.
velocity on the cards. Well, that's done with a Fibonacci sequence. So if you don't remember your math, that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 11, no, 8, 13. There we go.
Uh-huh.
It's You're adding the number to the previous number, kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and remember that's that complexity versus time. Okay, so what you do is you do
Okay.
this planning poker where you've got a website you can go to, and if you're in person, you actually can physically hold up cards. They have little planning poker decks. There's software that can do that too, so you can do it remote, and you'll hear the definition of what the card is, and you click on what it is, and they open it up and show what the whole team put, and you're looking at these points, and hey, 5 people on the team put 5 for this card, but 8 people put 3. Can somebody that's on the 5 talk about why they think it's a 5? Can somebody that's on the 3 tell me why they think it's a 3? Now if you
Right.
have the vast majority, 95% are at one point level, you might just move on and leave it at that point level. Okay, so there is some
Okay.
discussion that can happen there. The nice part of estimating, planning poker, and all of that is, one of the questions I get a lot of times is, what if you do if it's way too many points or not enough points? That balances out over time. A team
Okay.
invariably is going to underestimate some and overestimate others. You're very rarely going to be dead on what a card's points should be. Okay? And it balances out. So some are going to be too high, some are going to be too low. You get the work done. Okay?
Okay.
It's estimating. Any questions
Okay.
there?
And what is the scale, I guess? Is it like a 1 through 10 on importance, or the velocity you mentioned? Is that correct?
Okay, so the velocity is that Fibonacci sequence.
Okay.
Okay. If you look at various planning poker sites, you'll see it, but it's typically 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13,
Okay. 13.
21, and there's a number. There's sometimes a number above that, and on some planning poker sites, you'll see a coffee card and a question mark. So question mark means I have no clue. I couldn't estimate that one, which is what I would estimate for most back end cards. Coffee means I'm totally fried doing this work planning at the moment, and I need a
Mhm.
break.
Yeah.
um, I've been on teams where you'll point between 1 and 21. I've been on teams where 8 is your max.
Okay.
I've been on teams that have said, hey, those Fibonacci points are number of days. They could care
Okay.
less about the complexity of the cards.
Right.
Every team does it a little bit differently.
Okay.
Okay. In fact, I've never seen it. Some teams I've heard of planning with t-shirt sizes. So
Hmm.
extra small, small, medium, large, then into the XLs
Yes.
and up.
Yeah.
I think
Interesting.
that would be harder to calculate what your average is, but
Right.
you know. So, getting into what we do each day. Okay. Stand up is that 15-minute window that we do every day. Okay.
Okay.
I just saw a meme the other night about stand up. Some lady had seen her husband's calendar and wondering why he's doing stand up comedy with his engineers every morning. From a remote perspective, I could see that. Um, but here's the thing: in person, it's called stand up because that's what you did. I mean, you
Yeah.
literally stand up, you tell what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and what you've got blocking getting work done.
Mm. Okay.
Okay? At the end of the 15
Yeah.
minutes, you sit back down. Okay? We're all virtual now, so we don't stand up much for stand up anymore. It's not
Right.
intended to be comedy. Um, and that 15 minutes, we try and make a hard requirement 15 minutes. Okay? This isn't something to deeply plan out a whole day. You're going to have things in there where, yeah, I'm working with so and so, we need to get this done, and then so and so says, hey, I need to get such and such done, but I need to talk to Steven to make sure we get that right. Okay, at that point, typically your Scrum Master is going to say, perfect, you and Steven get together offline.
Yeah.
Take it outside the meeting. Okay?
Mm.
This should be the whole team. And you're accountable for just that simple stuff. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What's blocking you? What impediments do you have? That's simple.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds simple, but man, you'd be amazed how long these will run, like 45 minutes if you're not careful. Okay?
Right.
We typically try and push really hard for that to be a 15-minute. Okay?
Okay.
So, the work done during the day. Okay? Um, the work done during the day should be pretty straightforward at that point. There might have been some planning done on who's going to pair on particular cards if you get somebody that's an expert and somebody that wants to learn an area. We track the progress on that burn down chart. One of the things to point out here is that each team member is responsible for keeping their task cards updated. Okay, there are columns that it'll be in from the backlog to in dev, which means I'm writing code, to dev testing, which means I'm testing it out, I'm merging a PR up,
Right.
to ready for stage, which means I've gone through that testing, I've tested it out, I think enough to say that this works. It goes to stage. Okay, at the stage level, then somebody else will move that code, and once it gets into stage, then business can test it. That business owner can test it out, and then eventually it moves to production. But at that point, once business tests it out, they move the card to done. It could move back at any point in time, and I got a slide later on to kind of show some of that. Okay.
Okay.
I would like to point out here that there are a lot of meetings. I've been hearing about a lot of meetings that we have. Okay, there are other stressors in the day too. You know, if you're going to be a developer at some point, these are things to be aware of. Okay,
Mm.
you're working with others quite a bit, whether it's pairing or working with the back-end developer, or working with UI to make sure you get done what they need to do. Getting Having your code not work correctly is a stressor. I mean, we're writing
Right.
code. You've written enough code to know it can be stressful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the big ones
Yes.
that gets me at times is when you get bug reports about your code, my code.
Mm.
Okay, I talk to folks all the time about the fact that you need to get past that, and that also ties into the next one, which is the peer review. When somebody's reviewing your code, okay, it's easy to get irritated when somebody makes a comment about your code, or somebody points out a bug in your code.
Right.
Okay, but the bottom line is, it's not your code. You're writing this code for somebody else. You're writing it for a business, right?
Right.
It's their code, not yours. Okay, so kind of keeping that separation is a good thing to keep in mind. I mean, there are enough stresses on the job. I mean, this is work. It's a four-letter word. Point that out. You know, there are stresses every day. Okay, and they come from angles you never expect at times. So let's get away from bullet points for a few seconds. Okay, so
Nice.
each day, you know, how does my typical day to go? My typical day is anywhere in these columns. Okay, I'm writing. If I've got a card, I'm writing functional code. That's the first thing I'm doing. I'm getting the code to work. I'm getting it to do what I expect it to do. Whatever that
Right.
feature is, whatever that bug is, I'm making it work right. Okay. Typically, you're not working with a greenfield project. Greenfield being from scratch. So there's an existing code base. There are existing unit tests. So if I write functional code, I pretty much guarantee I've broken some unit tests. So now I fixed my unit tests, and I have non-broken unit tests. Okay, I
Okay.
actually merge them in this way when I'm merging into a repository. I talk about my functional code. I talk about my non-broken unit tests. Then I go back and look at coverage, because most of your pipelines have coverage requirements. You have to have so much of your code covered by unit tests. And if you're not hitting the minimum, you're getting past the pipeline. It's going to stop. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so I look at the code coverage and make sure the code coverage is the right place. After all that's done, I go back again. When I worked on my functional code, I was testing it out, probably running my environment live and playing with the website and making sure I'm getting things working right. But I get through all of that, I go back and I manual test it again.
Okay.
Remember, I talked about on the card, you have acceptance tests, right? I'm
Right.
going to check those at a minimum. Okay? I'm going to test any possible thing I think can break this. Whatever the feature is.
Right.
Okay? Trying to be aware of any side issues that could come up that may or may not be in the acceptance tests. When I think I'm comfortable enough, I go through that PR process. That's the blue line there, merging it into dev.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. You've heard the phrase, it works on my machine, I'm assuming.
Right.
We don't
Yes.
typically ship your machine, so we merge it into dev, because, yeah, it could work on your computer, but it might not work in the dev environment, which the dev should very closely mirror stage testing and production. Okay.
Right.
So you get it running over there. You run through the same manual testing you did previously. If something's not working right, you go back to that functional code. Go back through that loop again. Okay?
Mm.
When you got it working right and you're comfortable about moving forward with it, that's when you're indicating in some way that we need to move it to stage and testing. Stage and testing are typically different machines. Okay? Because testing will be for the testers. They're going to manually test and automated tests on there generally. Okay?
Right.
And they're developing automated tests, so they typically need another machine to be able to run those, because they're pretty hefty tests generally. Okay, and the testing we're talking about there, that's not unit testing. Okay, that's automated testing. That's spinning up your full stack from the database to your front end code. They're logging in, they're running a certain process, they're logging back out. They're logging in, they're running another process, they're logging back out. They're doing things on that website actively. Okay? Which is why they need a separate machine. Stage generally is for the business folks to hop in and take a look and play with it pretty close to live. As close as they can get to live. Okay?
Okay.
Anywhere along the way, in the manual testing, in the automated testing, the business testing, if there are problems, excuse me, if there are problems, guess what? It goes all the way back to writing functional code.
Right.
Go back to in dev and come all the way back through again. Okay? Those are mildly frustrating days when your code comes all the way back because some little thing is broken. Okay, assuming all that works right, then we merge it into production. Okay? You know, it's this is a pretty good environment. There are better, and there are you know, right here we're automating merging into dev. The process of merging from stage to production is semi-automated. The process of moving from dev to stage, it takes an actual person to click some buttons to make those kind of things happen. There are companies where all of that's automated, and they have things like A/B testing, and if you pass the A/B testing, it automatically moves forward. Okay.
Okay.
I've seen the other end, companies that have no testing at all. Like, I wrote functional code.
Okay.
Wasn't allowed to write unit tests because my boss wanted me to get that out as fast as possible. So maybe a little tiny bit of unit testing. And I went over to my boss and he poked at it for a while. That was his extent of manual testing. And if he liked what he saw, he copied the code over onto the server. No tracking of history of code or anything like that. So you're going to see everything in between. That horrendous scenario up through really automated, really cool stuff. Okay. But this is a typical day that I work with. Okay. Any questions there?
Which stage, I guess, in all your experience of doing this, would you say is the most annoying?
Most annoying is probably either the manual testing by your testers or the business testing.
Okay.
Business usually comes out pretty good, but your testers quite often. It's amazing how deep into finding odd scenarios they can go sometimes. You know, edge cases that you never would have considered. Had a scenario recently where she had found an edge case. I knew we had a bug for it. She didn't want to hear it. Had to go back to our tech lead, who indicated that he had kind of screwed up on the card that I was working on and put too much information in, knowing that we had another card out there to handle that edge case. You know, I will often tell people that, you know, the folks that want to move from being a tester to be a developer, there's a reason that businesses are leery of doing that. Testers are unique. And they're generally good people, but man, they'll drive you nuts. They will drive you absolutely bonkers. Okay? And when you find good ones, businesses are very, very reluctant to give them up. Okay? Because what they do is very, very valuable, too. I know that. It's still frustrating.
Right.
Okay. Anything else? Good there?
And what, I guess, advice would you give people who are QA and want to make that transition to engineering?
Patience and persistence more than anything. I know of this, not because I've done it myself. Okay, I know of that difficulty because I watched 2 or 3 folks within my own company go through that challenge. They were very, very good manual/automated testers that wanted to be regular developers and just weren't being given opportunities. And 2 of the 3 left our company to take a position as a developer and eventually came back to our company once they had proven themselves as a developer. You know, it's, you know, I don't know if I've got any advice other than just be aware that internally within your company, that's going to be very, very difficult to do. It might take stepping away. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so let's see, where are we at next? Okay, so each day there's collaboration. You're going to help other people do work. You're going to be pair programming. You're going to be doing peer reviews. Peer reviews are a lot of fun, reviewing other people's code. Be open and honest. If you see something wrong, jump in and ask a question. If you see something you think might be wrong, jump in and ask a question. Okay, it's an
Okay.
opportunity to learn. I mean, peer reviews should be discussion. Quite often they're not seen that way. They're seen as somebody's pointing something out wrong with my code. Okay.
Okay.
You should be asking for and giving help through the day. And entry level can help, whether you believe it or not. you know, I write a lot of code. I write a lot of code really fast. I write a lot of really good code really fast. None of it's perfect.
Yeah.
Quite often I need a second set of eyes looking over my code. Yes, I can spell variables wrong. Yes, I can forget to call my function. Just like we do when we're early on in development. Okay?
Right.
Um, Sometimes my code is complex enough, I need 3 or 4 other developers to go in and poke at it. Not poke at the code, poke at the running code. Poke at the website. Okay? Making sure that all code meets that definition of done. Okay? And as I said earlier, don't forget, updating that task board is critical. Okay? That's one of those pieces I see people slide on at times, and that always bothers me a little bit.
Right.
If something were to happen to me, they need to know how to move these cards forward. Okay? They need to know where I was at.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, so going back to the sprint, okay, we talked about days, we talked about some of the early sprint stuff. One of the things you come into is a sprint review, okay, and this is usually the big rah-rah session. This is, hey, we did these cool things. And the business goes, hey, thank you for these awesome, really cool things, usually, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But this is the chance to demonstrate the work done, okay? Stakeholders are usually invited. At the very least, it's a product owner. I've seen sprint reviews that have been just a product owner. I've seen sprint reviews that have been product owner and maybe a half dozen people from various teams. I've seen sprint reviews where CEO of the company is in there.
Okay.
Okay. Stakeholders, people that are going to use this software. Okay. You got to have a decent amount of time for the demo of the work being done. Typically at entry level, you don't worry about how much time you're told how long that time is going to be. Okay, but this is that chance to celebrate work done and showcase accomplishments. I saw a study the other day talking about what are some of the biggest factors in people being happy and satisfied at work, and it was kind of surprising that probably the biggest factor was feeling like you've accomplished work, that you've gotten something done.
Right.
That's one of the really cool parts as a developer is you get something done every day.
Right.
You get to showcase it every 2 weeks. That's really cool. And
Exactly.
it usually goes really well. I had seen bad ones. Recently we had our testing environment was down. We had stage available, and then they had a group of pen testers came in to hammer our stage environment. So we're trying to run our demo from the dev environment, which dev environment's always all screwed up. I mean, we reset the database on a regular basis. It's still all screwed up. It's supposed to be. It's not intended for anybody ever to look at as being even close to production. Okay, so these can go
Okay.
sour, but really, at its simplest, it's celebrating. Okay. And it's really nice because you get first-hand feedback
Yeah.
from the people that are using the code, and that's really cool. Sometimes it's really cool just to see it.
Yeah.
I've seen demos where one of your stakeholders actually said, "Hey, let me show you this thing on what I do here."
Mm-hmm.
And man, sometimes users will screw up your code left and right. They will find ways you never expected to use your code. So it's really cool to see that sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, I was stressing the other day. I had one where I had to refresh the various task pages, but I had to refresh dashboard page at the same time. And one of the things that bugged me was this dashboard, each event expands and shows the tasks. Okay, so think of a table, and you had a table
Right.
inside of a table. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Well, what was happening was every time it refreshed, that closed. And you'd open it up and you'd modify another task, and it would close. And you'd open it up and modify another task, and it would close. That was driving me nuts. Well, in the demo, that's exactly what I saw them doing, except for the refresh wasn't wired in. So what they would do is they'd open it up, they'd change a setting, they'd click the manual refresh button, and it would close. And they were going almost as fast as I was with my code. I'm like, my code's really good. It's doing exactly what they're saying, but it's cutting out that manual refresh button every time. That was awesome to see. I still did get to
Right.
keep it. I figured out a way to keep it open, which is even cooler, but they haven't gotten that version yet. That'll be cool when they get that. Okay.
I
So sprint review, celebration. Pretty simple, right?
yeah.
Sprint retro. Okay, so sprint retrospective is supposed to be that point in time when you can talk about anything you saw going well, not so well, anything that could be improved. This is a time when you can vent. Okay, business is not supposed to be in there. Yes, the product owner could be there. Okay,
Okay.
your team, your product owner, your scrum master have to be there. Shouldn't be anybody else there. You know,
Okay.
I've had times when a BA or times when the business owner was actually hampering getting work done, and this is when you talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, this is when the team, everybody on the team, has an equal voice in improving the team and making things better. Okay, not real complicated. I do usually with junior devs, entry level folks, you know, be careful of wording. You know, this isn't a place to open up and cuss. You know, be careful of pointing people out.
Okay.
You know, but other than that, it should be pretty much fair game.
Okay.
Take a sprint or two and see what they're like. See what the kind of things you're hearing before you launch out full bore into this is what screwed up. Right? But at the same time, somebody does something cool, somebody helps you out, which happens a lot when you're starting out, right?
Right.
Share that here. What went well? Okay. So I want to kind of take the whole thing, go back and look at this in a visual. All right, so this is a sprint, 2 weeks. Daily stand-up, work collaboration, all 10 days. Okay, I did put weekends in here.
Right.
But I started my sprint here, but it actually, technically, that would usually be like a Wednesday.
Okay.
So it's not a one-to-one match. I just wanted to get a rough idea of days. Okay, so in here you see the sprint planning at the beginning. You've got 3 Amigo meetings. After that, you got backlog refinement. So the 3 Amigo are fleshing out cards. They're getting more detail into cards. In backlog refinement, you're taking a look at those cards and making sure they're complete. Getting points on them, getting them into the sprint backlog. Okay. At the end of the sprint, we have our sprint review, sprint retro, and you roll right back into sprint planning the next day.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah. Is that very normal for, I guess, the work week to start on Wednesdays, or is it depending on the company?
I would say it's pretty normal.
Okay.
Now, depending on the company, there can be variations. I've seen companies with 1 week sprints, which is horrible. I've seen companies that don't use sprints at all. Typically, Wednesday ends up being a nice time to start a sprint. That Tuesday close out, Wednesday start up.
Okay.
Because typically what's happening is Monday, Tuesday is when you're really cramming to get your code ready for completion. Okay, and then you're demoing on Tuesday. On Wednesday, you're starting up clean with all your new stuff, but at the same time, your code is staging through to production. So if there are issues, you got some time to deal with it. If you closed on a Friday, your code's moving in production over the weekend when nobody's there.
Right.
and if something comes up and glitches, that's hard to accommodate. The agile process has kind of figured out that Wednesday is a really good day. Tuesday, Wednesday is a really good day to split on.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is what we have on the day in the life of a developer. I guess we went a little beyond just day in the life of. What are your thoughts, Shamir?
I think it's really cool. Um, Especially myself being I guess a junior level developer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really cool to really
What?
get a look as to um, how teams work
Mm-hmm.
and how different positions play a role.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was there anything in there that surprised you?
um, let me see.
It's okay if you say no.
Surprise me, no, because I honestly don't know anything. So I'm,
So it all
I
surprised
guess,
you.
yeah, it all surprised me. There you go.
Okay.
But I really love the slide of that you mentioned during I believe this the sprint on how um, getting inside some entry level developers like
Mm-hmm.
is important
Mm-hmm.
for them to speak out. 'Cause I guess there would be a lot of junior developers that probably come in and feel the need to prove themselves
Mm-hmm.
and not really speak up and ask questions. And I could see how that could be
I had
detrimental, I guess, to the
I had
process.
somebody the other day asked me, um, what was the number one reason you saw people get let go?
Mm,
And I mean, it took me a couple seconds to come up with it, but really, it comes down to communication, probably
right,
more than anything else.
right.
I try not to name names and companies and that kind of stuff, but I mean, I've had mid-level developers that were ready to move to senior, and I flat out told them, all you gotta do is ask. Fill out
Right.
some paperwork. You're ready. I know you're ready. I've told business you're ready. Two of the three filled out paperwork. Third one went to another company
Mm,
because
okay.
they offered more money, but she would have gotten more money and she turned in the paperwork and just talked. You know,
Right.
I've had recently. I had three developers that were entry. Um,
Okay.
I'm not gonna. I usually when I gauge skill level, these guys were fairly low, but
Hmm.
not impossibly so. Okay.
Right.
I currently have four developers that started at the same level and are probably mids pushing higher end of mids right now. But
Okay.
these three, one, communication was almost zero. In fact, 3 weeks
Mm,
into the job, I was asked by business to review him. I'm a contractor. I don't do that.
right.
Okay. I had almost zero communication other than what I forced on him. I went and looked and hadn't seen any code pushed to a branch in a 3 week window. He only had a 2 point
Wow.
card.
Mm,
I reported what I saw. He was gone within a week. Had
wow.
another one that just recently, she communicated a little bit, but really felt like she was pushing and rushing to get cards out. In fact, she was getting cards out so fast, I was having to fix the bugs, and I was working as hard as she was, just fixing the bugs. She was cranking stuff out so quick. But she
Mm,
refused to pair with anybody
hmm.
for whatever reason. I mean, and I never got her to talk to me about it. Eventually, they let her contract run out.
Yeah.
I had another one that I thought was headed that direction who I was PRing, and that was the main communication we had. I had an actual conversation with him on his first PR. On the second PR, he pushed some stuff up that I wasn't real comfortable with, and I mentioned that. And he pushed a change up. And what I realized in this was through the electronic communication, the man had lied to me twice. And I told him I was disappointed in how this card went and the work that he did because he was manually trying to make it look like something automated had happened and it didn't.
Mm.
But I made a reach out to his tech lead because he's on a different team and the front end lead that he's working with. And they said they were having the same problems with him and they would talk with him.
Right.
He's still there and we've been moving forward ever since. So clearly something went right there.
Right.
Okay. These are all communication issues. It's not code.
Yeah.
At all. You know, communication. One of the best I've got out of this group. I told you there are 4 that are doing really well. One of the best I've got has been working with me since January, about the time I met you, actually. And we're getting ready to split teams in January. He's going to be the front end lead of one of those teams.
Nice.
Okay. Now, he's a little junior for that. He knows that. He knows he can count on me to back him up. But this is a guy that every day made sure he talked to me for at least 20 minutes.
Nice.
Actually, almost got annoying for me because I get on in the morning and say, "Hey, Bob, good morning." Here we go again. But he talked through every bit of code he was working on until he was comfortable with it. When he was struggling on something, he reached out.
Right.
And yeah, it got a little annoying, but you know what? I know I can count on him.
That's right.
Here we are, what? 10 months later, 11 months later. I know I can count on him. I recommended him for the front end lead on that team. Communication was the key there.
Right.
More so than any code. Okay. Way off track in the day of a developer, but I mean that is part of a day of a developer is talking to each other. You know, I hear folks all the time talking about, you know, hey, I'm an introvert, that's why I got into programming because I don't have to talk to people. Man, is that a wrong assumption?
Right.
You know, I can't think of a time that I didn't talk with other people as a developer. I mean, that doesn't happen.
Right.
So, any other thoughts on this before we close this out?
It was an amazing talk. Thank you, Bob, for
Thank you for
this
joining me.
presentation. Oh, of course. I learned a lot. And now I know what to look for when I join a team.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right.